Hi, welcome to Dominate Your Day. I'm Dana Williams. I'm an executive coach who loves helping leaders discover their authentic purpose. Join me here on Dominate Your Day for conversations that ignite internal revolution and empower difference makers to lead from their strengths. Let's together create lasting impact. I'd like to introduce to Dominate Your Day podcast today, Liz Weber. Liz is an amazing individual. She was named 2025 Top 30 Global Gurus for Leadership. That's in the company along with like Simon Sinek and John Maxwell. So think about this: when Liz speaks, her clients listen. She's kind of created this personal brand as an advisor to boards, to owners, and C suite teams. And she's also very strategic thinker and thought partner for leaders. And she focuses on not only succession planning and culture, but she also is an amazing consultant, author, and speaker. So, Liz is one of those people that I wanted to make sure we had on the podcast so that you could hear her insights as we discuss today what's going on in the workplace today. There's quite a bit with clarity for leaders, for planning for board members, for succession planning, and for skip level meetings. So sit back and listen to Liz as she shares what she's seeing today in the workplace. Welcome to Dominate Your Day podcast. Today I've got Liz Weber with us. Liz is an amazing coach. And Liz, you are in Pennsylvania right now, is that right?
That's correct. Yes, South Central PA.
So just really have that. I think I'm seeing your personal brand as one of those people that comes in and works alongside executive leaders and corporate leaders in the workplace and helps be that strategic thought partner for them. Is that correct? Is that summarizing your brand well?
That's it. Yeah, that in a nutshell is what I do. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the leaders in the workplace right now are going through so much. So I'd love for us to just kind of dive in right now and talk about what you're seeing in the workplace right now in leadership and what leaders really can do through the recent culture shifts and the shifts in the workplace.
Sure. So, what I'm seeing with my clients, Dana, and basically who my clients are they are business owners or leaders in government agencies or companies, trade associations, or boards of directors. And my work with them is typically tangent to work that I've done with them on their strategic plan or their succession plan or some leadership development initiative within their organization. So when I'm having conversations with them, whether it's one-on-one or one to a group, what I'm seeing that they're struggling with the most right now is, I think what's pervasive is they are faced with so many challenges and so many opposing opinions and competing priorities that quite often they don't know what to focus on next. And I know that sounds pretty basic, but it can easily get overwhelming for the most experienced leader, not just someone who's mid-level, but individuals in the C-suite also. And what I spend a good bit of my time doing with them is helping them sort through what are those items that they're working on that are priority items, because if they move that particular issue forward, it has greater momentum and impact, positive impact, than do some of the lesser items on their potential hit list. So it's really helping them cut through the noise. And I think one of the benefits that occurs when we have conversations is I'm an objective outsider. And so I'm not enmeshed with the emotion and the internal politics and the legacy of some of the projects that they're dealing with. And so when I ask a question to the group, such as, well, what is the continuing ROI on this? And how is this helping you advance your strategic initiatives over the next 2 years that are critical for your viability? I can ask that question and everybody in the group will go, oh, crud. Well, that was Dana's favorite project for the past 15 years, but when Liz asks a question that way, it really doesn't have the ROI that it used to. So I'm able to ask in an objective way some of the questions that internally, when there's emotion and history and legacy tied to some things, it's a difficult question for them to ask themselves.
And I think having that listening partner right there, that just like you said, that comes in, that's not in the mire with them, that can just step back and call the question
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of a boardroom, or in the middle of an executive conference, or in the middle of a one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Have them really be challenged to think, why do you think we're in this space right now where leaders are so unclear about what their next steps are?
Well, just culturally, there's a lot of challenges that are going on. But with my clients, a challenge that many of them have been facing for the past several years, and COVID ramped it up, was they still are having a really hard time finding people, finding talent to fill their vacancies. Particularly my government clients, when I'm talking government, I'm talking state government. On average, they've got 30% vacancy rates. They can't find people for these positions that are qualified to do the jobs. My private sector companies, just now, they're starting to be able to get a funnel of people that are actually trying to apply to jobs versus them hunting, crazily to try to find people to hire that will have some of the skill sets and be willing to be trained to do the jobs that they need to do. So that's number one. What also, excuse me, what also has happened is, and there's still a lag from some of the challenges that COVID presented with a lot of my clients. What COVID did for those clients in my portfolio that had a number of individuals at the senior level, about 40% of my clients saw more experienced, longer term employees exit and retire sooner than they were anticipating. And so what that did is it just further created this bigger gulf of talent between those individuals that have experience and historical knowledge of how to do things and why things are done a certain way, and strategically how to adjust when something alters, and the next potential layer down who hadn't yet been trained or brought into a lot of those conversations and really didn't have that runway to ramp up their skill sets. So you've got a lot of managers now, granted it's 5 years on and they've got their sea legs under them, but there was a really long ramp up curve for a number of clients, private sector and public sector. And that depth of leadership talent with deep knowledge is still lacking in some degree with a lot of organizations.
So how would a leader in this spot right now, they're having layoffs, they're also needing people, they're trying to attract, how do you recommend, what strategy do you recommend for them right now as they're trying to get the right talent in the right seats in this space and time?
It's the buzz that everybody is talking about, but I've been talking about it for 30 years, is culture is everything. Your culture for the organization is either going to help you attract great talent or repel talent. And culture, as you know, with your background with Southwest Airlines, it's your calling card in the marketplace. It's your reputation. It's your personality. But the challenge is once people are attracted to you from what they hear in the marketplace, the real test is what do they experience once they actually sign on with you. And is the experience they were expecting, given the hype in the marketplace, what they're actually experiencing internally? And quite often, there's a massive disconnect. And, Bamboo HR has put out a number of studies, and one of the studies says within 7 days, your new hires are keenly aware that either there's a strong connection and it's consistent messaging with what they were expecting with what they're experiencing, or there's a massive disconnect. And that massive disconnect causes individuals to think, I didn't sign on for this. This isn't what I want. And so I share all that because if you want to create an organization where you have the ability to build depth, to build agility, to build enhanced performance, to increase your revenues, increase your profits, increase your margins, you need to be operating efficiently. And one of the ways to do that is make sure you're not churning staff. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure you have a great environment that people want to be a part of, number one. But then as they are a part of that community and of your organization, what they're experiencing is what they were expecting, and they like the experience. They want to be a part of the experience. They like being associated with that brand in the marketplace versus they kind of hide from it. That would be a worst case scenario. So all of that is to say, with my clients, one of the biggest things they can do right now is get really clear on what is the type of company you want to be and you want to be known for in the marketplace, and how big of a gap is that from where you are right now? And what are you doing to close that gap so that who you say you want to be to deliver the products or services that you deliver, are you creating a culture, an infrastructure, a series of products, services, offerings, the way you do things, the way you treat staff? Are all of those things in alignment to further embolden and embody the culture you say you have and want? Excuse me.
That is so true. And I think so many leaders rely on everybody else to manage the culture, and they don't realize that they're the culture keepers within their groups. And you could have an organization that doesn't have a good culture, but you could have a really strong leader who's built a culture within his or her team, and that's what keeps them engaged while they're waiting for the organization to catch up, right? So, and I'm sure with the boards that you've sat on and the executive suites that you've worked in, that's where you can influence that. But it's really down to the leader's role to carry that, right? Are you seeing that in your work?
You're absolutely correct, but it's also, excuse me for the coughs, but it's also the responsibility of the board, and it's also the responsibility of the C-suite, because
absolutely
the culture, the relationships, the communication style, the trust, the ease of interactions, the interpersonality smoothness or glitchiness of the C-suite or the board, it's apparent to everybody.
Absolutely. And when, like you said, when a client or an employee comes in and they see the board acting one way and the leader acting another, or vice versa, there's like, something's off here. I'm not seeing what I saw on the outside. And so it's having that mesh. So do you have an example of a company you worked with, a board you worked with, executive suite you worked with, and how you were able to help them transform and fix their culture? I mean, you don't have to mention names, but just example of, a case study or something where you were able to help them, because there's a lot of organizations out there right now with all the changes in the workplace trying to figure this out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when you asked the question, the example that comes to mind was, or is, I had the opportunity to work with a community bank that had about six regional or 6 branch offices. And the CEO had reached out to me because she had been given my name and had been told by the board of directors to implement performance reviews, because they hadn't done them like ever. And the board believed that by implementing these performance reviews and holding team members accountable to, hit whatever their expectations were, it was going to boost profits, because they needed to turn the financial situation around with this bank. And in talking with the CEO, who had been promoted from within, she had been the CFO. I asked her, I said, so do your managers know how to do performance reviews? And she said, no. And I said, do they know what expectations they have and what goals they have of employees? And she said, no. And I said, well, so how are they going to establish expectations for team members if there's no goals and there's no plan? It's going to be subjective. And she said, I don't know. That's what I'm hoping you'll teach them. And I said, well, I can't help you. And I said, I won't help you. And here's why. Because you're setting yourself and your team members up for failure because you're asking your managers to guess. Now, I said, what you're really looking for, I believe, is if you want to change the financial performance of the bank and you have a culture of not providing any feedback or guidance or anything that your team members or managers can align to, you need a cultural change. And you need to start thinking differently and to start thinking strategically and give everybody something objectively to focus on and align to. So long story short, she agreed and she said, I didn't think this was a good idea, but I was told to reach out. So long story short, what we did, Dana, was started from the board all the way through all employees and started with a strategic plan to provide them a line of sight, clarity, set goals, department plans, set goals, created position descriptions because many of them did have them, created performance expectations with all managers, started coaching, started training, trained on the new vision, mission, values, what it meant to everybody, what it looks like, what it embodies. And it took 7 years. I'll be honest, it took 7 years. But that organization went from a culture when we had our first training program with their frontline tellers and regional or branch managers, people sitting in the room literally with their arms crossed, glaring at me and glaring at one another and not talking to individuals from a different branch. To 7 years later, I walked into the final training program after all this work had been done with the CEO and her team. She was amazing. But I walked into the final session and there were already people there like half hour before we were starting. They were talking, they were laughing. The senior vice president of commercial lending was sitting with a group of tellers that I knew were from different branch locations. The CEO was sitting with a different group of people and they were talking and laughing. And the culture, the tone was a complete 180 from where we started. So from an emotional perspective, I mean, I get goosebumps still thinking about it. It was such a dynamic shift. But here's the thing that really matters to the shareholders. That bank has been a top 200 performing community bank for the last 5 years.
So it affects the profit. And
it affects the bottom line. Yeah. It affects the bottom line.
So what a great story. Mm-hmm. You mentioned some things there that I want to kind of pull out and let's go a little bit deeper on. Really, I think for the president of a bank reaching out when the board told her this, and that she had the courage to listen to you and realize that you were not trying to please her. You were saying, no, this won't work. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times we're just trying to do what somebody told us we're supposed to do instead of calling the question. So I think that speaks to your strategy. Let's go back and really do this first. And then it takes time. It's not an overnight. You can't just have a one and done session or get everybody on. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's a grassroots drip, drip, drip until the transformation happens.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, it happened, but it took some time. And that's what I think leaders need to know. This is we're humans, and this is what it takes. It's not an overnight success, but having that strategy probably gave them all confidence that they had a plan and they had clarity of where they were going.
Well, and the thing again, and I give the CEO all the credit because she spearheaded it internally and she really worked with her leadership team. But it's having that plan and then connecting with that plan every quarter and asking what's working, what's not working, what do we need to tweak, and building that discipline to realize the big goal isn't going to change, but our individual steps in the shorter term may need to adjust given the current reality of what we're dealing with at that moment. And their ability to get into that cadence was a big game changer. But also to your point, I just want to echo, it does take time because as I always say, you're dealing with people and people are wacky. So, in a situation like this, there were some team members when it was shared with them what was going to possibly be happening over the next 1, 2, or 3 years. Some team members that had been there for years were like, I'm not dealing with this and left. Others thought, well, this will burn out in about 6 months. So if I just resist long enough, I can wait this out. So, they had to deal with that type of behavior internally. But then there was also a lot of skill development, and there were some shifts in personnel. Good people decided to go someplace else or move, and other people came in, and some worked out and some didn't. So it was an iterative process, but it was all built upon the same desired outcome.
And I love having that strategy from inside out and really working and not worrying about when people aren't joining you, but focus on the ones that are.
Yeah.
And because that's where the movement is. If we stay back, right, with the ones that aren't joining, it's just going to keep being there. So I'd like to pivot, Liz, and what you mentioned about boards, and you work with boards. So tell me what you're seeing right now as we think about when this board told the CEO they wanted this to happen. What are you seeing in boards right now? You're very active with boards. You're on some boards. You're also guiding people on boards. What are you seeing right now in the workplace with boards?
Well, it's an interesting question because I work with some private boards, but also a lot of nonprofits. And I'll be candid. There isn't quite often in nonprofits, there is a higher percentage of individuals on the board that have less business experience than those on some of the for-profit boards. However, a challenge that I see with both types of boards, private or nonprofit, is there still is a large number of board directors or trustees for foundations and things that don't understand what their job is as a director or trustee. They still have this mindset they're like a senior vice president and they get to call the shots. And so it's usually a good bit of information sharing, educating, and helping them, coaching them up to understand how a well-functioning board should operate and what a well-functioning board's job really is in conjunction with the CEO, the president, or the executive staff, and how that looks, how that operates, and where their span of authority ends, but also what their obligation to management is. And so it's still that education piece.
So really helping, because I think it sounds like you work with a lot of boards, and I like how you distinguish between the differences between the nonprofit and the profit, and what their level of understanding is and running. So what is the big thing you do when you come in and work with boards that you kind of see that helps them a lot as you serve as a board of directors, or you are guiding board of directors in strategic?
More often than not, I'm guiding them in one of two ways. Helping them participate to whatever degree has been determined in creating the strategic plan for the organization or the company. Or more often than not, what I'm doing is I am educating them before the strategic planning process starts as to what the process is going to look like, what their role in the process will be, what their responsibility after the process is in regards to a plan, and their ability to provide feedback on the plan, to make adjustments to the plan. But once the plan is approved and going forward, they don't have the ability to individually start making adjustments to the plan or reaching down into management and asking management to do X, Y, and Z. And again, it's going to sound really basic, but it's a conversation I have with every single board, is to help them understand that once that plan is set, for most organizations, that is the performance plan for your CEO. And so that establishes his or her bandwidth with their team to get things done. That's what should be covering them and their budget and their timelines of things. So pet projects and, one-off requests from a director, a board director, need to stop. It's no longer a viable way of operating.
It's like that squirrel in the room. Oops, let's go chase that one now. And you're like, wait, this isn't part of the plan.
Right, exactly.
What do we do? Yeah. So really helping them stay focused on that and making that a part of the performance plan for the CO sounds brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, I think that is the key. And another thing I'm seeing and hearing about from my clients, and I know you are because I see it in all of the work you're doing, is how to get those next level leaders ready to take on the role of the leaders in place right now,
Mm-hmm.
and developing a good succession plan. What are your insights and thoughts on that as you're working with leadership groups?
So one of the things that I strongly recommend my clients do is when we are meeting once a quarter after their strategic plan has been approved and starting to roll it out. Those quarterly sessions, we're tracking what's working, what's not working, what needs to be tweaked on the plan. I say that because I recommend to my clients before that quarterly update session, typically with the executive staff and some division directors or others, key players, not the entire leadership team. But before those quarterly updates, I'm recommending that the leaders reach down into their teams to say, quarterly updates coming in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. What are you dealing with your team? What issues do you have that I need to be aware of that maybe we need to raise at the quarterly meeting so that we're shifting a timeline, or you need additional resources, or we're behind schedule on something? And you're reaching down for information. You're informing them of a cadence, and you're starting them to get to think about whole organization, not just their team or your division. And you start, as you used before, kind of dripping this information on a regular basis. Hey, it's time for us to lift our eyes up and think about the whole organization and our impact and the work that we're doing that could possibly be affecting somebody else, or how we need help from somebody else. So reach down before the quarterly update, have the quarterly update, whatever the adjustments are, come back and report down into your chain of command again. Here's what's being adjusted and here's why. The reason I recommend that's twofold. Number one, you, again, are providing breadcrumbs and keeping them informed. But more than anything else, you're starting to really make this connection of the reason we're doing X is because it's on the plan, or because it's going to affect the plan. We start breaking down these silos of, we just got to get our work done and not worry about anybody else. The other thing that it starts to alleviate is this pushback of, where did that come from? Why are we doing that now? Well, it's because it's the next thing on the plan. And so I say that to answer your question when you're talking about succession planning. The better job we can do of deepening the understanding of our leaders, and I don't mean, they don't even have to be in a supervisory role, but individuals in the company, of what are we doing? How does your role affect the work? What's happening next? The greater that we can build that awareness, the individual's minds open up, and we start getting this understanding of empathy for what other people are dealing with. The other thing that happens then is when we're also looking at, here's what's coming next on the plan. When it comes time to do performance planning for setting goals with individual employees, we're looking at the plan and we're saying, Dana, if we look at what's happening over the next year and 2 years of the company plan, we had our department meeting last week and you heard, here's how we're expecting it to impact our department. Therefore, given your position as, senior team strategist or whatever, this is what I think would be helpful for you to develop over the next 2 years to really allow you to perform even stronger than you are right now. You might want to get this certification and this certification, but I think it would also be helpful if you develop this skill and that skill. It draws a clear line of sight between what I would like you to enhance as far as skill developments, what you believe would be important, based upon where we see the future of our department going together. And again, it creates this objectivity and a line of sight And it's no longer just me making up stuff. There's a reason for it.
I think the employee also that's in that next level leadership, waiting and watching all this ahead of them, like, well, where am I going?
Mm-hmm.
And who's developing me?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I get value and meaningful work for what I'm doing here? How's it connected to the plan?
Exactly.
I think that is the biggest thing that a lot of leaders, when they're trying to develop those people underneath them, they fail to remember that, because then those people are starting to look for elsewhere because they're not feeling like there's a plan for them
Right.
as they move forward.
Right.
And so I think having succession planning as a big piece of this is very powerful. And I love the fact that you focus on that. So as we get ready to close out, Liz, what is there anything that's coming up for you that you, when you think about this leader in the workplace, they're a difference maker, they want to make an impact, you're seeing what's going on right now. We've talked about culture, we've talked about boards, we've talked about succession planning. Anything else that's coming up for you that you want to make sure our leaders hear that would help them in the workplace right now as they're thinking broadly into the next 2026 beyond up to 2030? Anything that's coming up for you as you're thinking about getting that, when we started off with, what to focus on in the clarity, but anything else that you want to share with them that would be insightful or just coming up?
As you're asking the question, I don't know why it's not for me coming up, but it's something that I've seen with just actually two of my clients in the last couple of weeks that I wasn't aware had been an issue internally for both of them. But situations arose, and when I discussed it with both of the CEOs in the two different organizations, their eyes kind of went like, "Whoa, yeah!" And it's creating an opportunity for once a quarter for skip level meetings to enable individuals who don't otherwise don't otherwise have access to you or are somewhat for some reason intimidated by you, to be able to have small group conversations with you or one-on-one conversations with you, just so you can hear directly from them what they see their challenges are, or way they see their misunderstanding. And the purpose of the skip level is not to exclude and create a situation where you're trying to jump the chain of command. The skip level is to, number one, lessen the intimidation factor, if there is any, but also it's an opportunity for you then to hear directly what your managers should be hearing, for then you to meet with your managers and say, here's what I'm hearing. What are you guys hearing? And how do we, if we need to develop solutions for something, how do we develop solutions for that? Or we're doing this right. We need to continue to beat the same drum. I just have been finding that piece has been missing. And it kind of goes to your comment earlier, where a lot of team members were feeling like, well, that's leadership. That's not me. I can't really say anything. I don't have a voice there. And it's not that every voice is going to, make a difference and action is going to be taken, but it's going to lessen that idea of I don't matter. And everybody has a job because the job matters, and therefore the team member matters. We want to make sure it's a good experience for everybody. But I also think it's an incredibly educational opportunity for the senior leader to get out of his or her space and hear from different people that say things differently.
I love that. Just really intentionally listening and giving those other layers of people in different areas you don't get to see all the time or talk to all the time, a voice at the table.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Wow, Liz, thank you so much for sharing today and guiding us through kind of what you're seeing in the workplace right now and some thoughts on strategies and the work you're doing as a global leader in the workplace. We really appreciate it and appreciate you sharing your time today with the audience.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining me on Dominate Your Day. I'm Dana Williams, and I've loved spending time with you. And if today's episode sparked something for you, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to use their strengths to make a difference. And hey, I'd love for you to stay connected. So visit our website at danawilliamsco.com, and you can get all kinds of resources and inspiration there. Until next time, keep showing up, leading authentically, and dominating your day.